Is the President of the United States a racist?
This is a behavior of a toddler who is not getting his way.
We heard from a president held in low regard by most Americans.
His ego is too much in the way here.
Donald Trump is not a man who deals particularly well with opposition.
There is a national emergency, I would submit, and we saw it last night. It's him.
A new study finding mainstream media coverage of President Trump was 90% negative last year in 2018. But despite the media's disapproval, public opinion of the president actually went up last year. Some of the coverage on the three major networks was negative.
Well, clearly the mainstream media has an agenda here, and their agenda is to hurt the President of the United States. Just when you think things can't get worse, they do. This week we have the Washington Post fact-checking burgers that the President brought in for Clemson football players. We have CNN drooling over this insane idea that the President is a Russian agent. And we have countless more examples of this. So
because while there may be a love affair between Donald Trump and Fox News itself, Fox News viewers are growing to despise the President of the United States.
Report in the New York Times out today saying that a bruised Trump faces uncertain 2020 prospects. His team fears a primary fight. Are you worried about a primary fight? Are you worried about a primary fight?
Are you worried about a primary fight?
No, I'm not. This president enjoys popularity we have not seen in our party for a sitting president. Any primary challenge is really just a dream, a pipe dream out there. So if anyone wants to run against the president, I can tell you this, you will lose, and you will lose handedly, because this president enjoys overwhelming support of our party to the tune of 90%.
Well, that's an answer. A lot of times you don't get definitive answers. I appreciate a definitive.
MSNBC and CNN spent 53 minutes and 20 seconds, and the network spent just over 19 minutes on the confrontation between those Covington Catholic high school students and Native American protesters. That story coming after the network spent 27 and a half minutes on BuzzFeed's report that said President Trump directed Michael Cohen to lie to Congress. MSNBC and CNN mentioned impeachment in relation to the report 179 times on Friday alone. But then the Mueller team released a rare statement saying the BuzzFeed report was inaccurate. So good morning to you.
Great to be here.
Why the rush to judgment?
I think the answer to that question is very simple. Many members of the press have hated Donald Trump from the start, since he decided to run for president. And I don't say that lightly, but I think since he decided to run for president, members of the media have been on a mission to prove themselves right. And in the process, they've started to believe their own fake news. And what I think all of the media needs to realize right now, especially in light of what happened this weekend, is that fake news has real consequences. Just imagine if there were no hour, 2 hour long videos that could exonerate these high school boys, right. Their lives could be ruined. And imagine if the special counsel didn't come out and make this statement. I imagine many members of Congress and the media would be pushing still to impeach President Trump. Fake news has consequences.
But they can make anything bad because they are the fake, disgusting news.
Not going to D.C. All right. The British paper, the Daily Telegraph, issued a humiliating apology on Saturday, admitting an article titled "The Mystery of Melania" was full of fake news about the First Lady. They took it all back and paid her substantial damages. There's no point in recounting the story's lies. They're the same stuff you heard many times before, part of a larger industry built on unknown sources and bitter bias. And it shows you the kind of year the media is having, and it's only been 3 weeks. But you have the BuzzFeed debacle, the Covington smear, layoffs at clickbait mills like BuzzFeed and the Huffington Post, CNN mocked for pretending they stumbled onto Roger Stone's arrest. And now you got this brutal Telegraph humbling. These events have one thing in common: accountability. It's new and it's good for everyone, especially you. Because you may not know how false the Melania coverage is, but you can bet she does. And that's the point. You never know what fake news is until it's about you. Ask anyone who's ever been the subject of a story. Unless they're vacuous actors pumping a socially conscious film, it's never, ever good. It's why, love him or hate him, Trump's war with fake news makes the past 2 years worth it. His disruption has exposed the hidden levers in so many dark arts, from trade to immigration to copy editing and fact-checking. So if only one result from the Trump era is a media that thinks twice before destroying someone for fun and profit, then I'd call that a win, wouldn't you? All right. Every single person here has been the subject of a story. How close was the story to the facts?
Oh, I mean, I was the subject of several, but when I left a particular show, I remember seeing something in the Daily Mail and reading it and being like, false.
Yes.
I would say 80% of it
Right.
was false. And they put just enough truth in there where there's like a tiny nugget of truth. And they count on you not doing anything. I didn't do anything about it because I was advised, leave
Right.
it. You're going to add fuel to the fire. You're going to draw attention to it. But the truth is, then you let it sit out there and it drives you crazy because you're like, this is not me. This is a false perception. And if anybody reads it, you don't want them to walk away thinking
And it's
that.
forever.
And it's forever.
It sits up
It's
there.
infuriating.
It sits up there. But to Jed's point, Jesse, if you it's why Trump is refreshing in that he actually is willing to go chase this thing like a dog and catch the car.
Right. This is like Wikipedia is more accurate than some of this stuff, and they got basic facts wrong. I think Americans need to realize something, Greg. Journalists are not that bright. These people, they didn't graduate first in their class from Harvard. They live in small apartments in New York and D.C. They don't have a lot of money.
So do most of us.
They're boring people at parties. If you line them up between bankers and advertising executives and lawyers, they rank dead last on intelligence. Think about it. They get stuff wrong all the time.
You are the king of generalizations.
It's true. I mean, they call the White House Correspondents' Dinner Party a nerd prom because it's filled with nerds. These people aren't that intelligent, but they act superior, and they hate Donald Trump, and they're riddled with errors in their stories. And guess what? All of the errors make Republicans look bad. Why is it that they never make mistakes that make Democrats look bad? It's always on the other side.
I am your voice.
Switching gears, peaceful activists or political rioters. When it came to protests during the Kavanaugh confirmation process, mainstream media saw it this way.
Protesters both for and against Kavanaugh's confirmation are making their voices heard.
And you can see a few protesters up there. It's sort of an act of civil disobedience.
There was nothing violent about these protests.
One of the principles of our democratic process is that protest is patriotism, and they're showing that every single day with that courage.
That courage. But compare that coverage to the coverage of Tea Party protests about 10 years ago.
This is a party for Obama bashers, and I think this is not really family viewing.
Do you think that there are racist elements in the Tea Party?
You've got these guys going around acting like street thugs. I mean, it isn't far from what we saw in the 30s, where all of a sudden political parties started showing up in uniform.
Okay, a little different. Here with a closer look at this media bias, Sagar Enjeti, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. Sagar, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So the folks in the last couple of weeks who were protesting Kavanaugh, patriotic, courageous, civil disobedience, but when the coverage came to the Tea Party back in 2009, street thugs, racist elements in the Tea Party, things like that. Why the double standard?
Yeah, you really could not see more of a stark difference. And it really is because a lot of the sympathies for these protesters are held by some of the reporters themselves. And there really was an active effort to cast them in the best of light. They made sure not to cover the most extreme elements. Anybody who was here in Washington knew that there were some really violent threats. All you had to do was spend a little bit of time on Capitol Hill and see how the members had to be surrounded at all times by police in order to keep them away from really some of the most violent people that received only coverage from places like at the Daily Caller.
What do you make, though, of the imagery? You see all these people. Some of it is violent. Some of it's certainly noisy. No problem with that. But then you see Ted Cruz getting run out of a restaurant, things like that. And then you've got the Republicans, in some cases, referring to this as mob rule. Is that appropriate?
In some cases, it certainly is. I saw a few people trying to actually say that a mob did not drive Ted Cruz out of a restaurant. I watched that video. He was quite literally surrounded and separated from his wife in a Washington, D.C. restaurant. I've seen members unable to get into elevators, members who are unable to get into their cars without being accosted. It's a terrible time here in D.C., and part of the real scandal here is that they are not receiving any real critical coverage, and in many cases they are actually receiving positive coverage, which only emboldens them. Well, and you look at the coverage regarding President Trump. The Media Research Center did an analysis. We got it over on the big board. Coverage 92% negative. So perhaps that does shade what the manner in which some of the mainstream networks do cover this administration and politics in general. 92% isn't surprising. What's even more interesting in that study is that the thing that got the most coverage was actually the Russia investigation, which is something, if you look at the polling, that people care about the least. I'm in the White House briefing room every day, and from where I stand, there are a lot of people who are much more interested in impressing the people around them by asking about the Russia investigation than in delivering the actual news that the American people care about. Well, and according to a Media Research Center, between June and September, the Russia collusion investigation on the networks got 342 minutes, and then followed by immigration with 300, Kavanaugh fight close to 300 as well. But then the administration's economic achievements got 14 minutes. Not much. Really? Yeah, not much at all, especially when the economy is under a fundamental transformation and we have a new trade deal with Canada and Mexico. These are things that affect the lives of millions and millions of people, and it deserves a lot more scrutiny. Absolutely, and it would be nice to get some publicity so people know what's going on. All right, Sagar, thank you very much for joining us live from our nation's capital. Thanks for having me. You bet.